Let's go ahead and Brett, are you ready to share your slide next?
Yeah, I sure am. I'm Bret Hodne. I'm very honored to be able to serve on this committee and then also be able to share some information for you. It's been interesting listening to the dynamics of what Mitch and Ben both have to deal with. We have some similarities, but we have some differences. I think, the interesting thing about government is it always seems like we're in this lead lag cycle. We always seem to be, slow to make changes. I think, based upon the organization you're in, it may be slower or faster. But it's been interesting just to listen to Mitch and Ben to see, how government is reacting and really starting to take this seriously and move some things forward. But one of the things, I'm going to go back a little bit in history, about the time before this was really starting to be a problem, all of our positions were basically heavy equipment operators pay. So they were called public services operations specialists. It was just one position. We did that several years before, but the salary range was getting up there close to about $68,000 a year on the top. The other thing that back before this all started, we had a change in the union negotiation process in the state of Iowa. They were typically seeing cost of living average increases back of about 2 to 3% and an automatic step increase of 4.5%. So they were typically seeing 6 to 8% increases every year. So our personnel costs were pretty high, but we had a very stable workforce. Well, then I had kind of decided to create a new position called a public services operator position, more entry level. It was kind of from a fiscal standpoint. We had plenty of trained operators to handle the higher level equipment, the more specialized stuff. So we thought it might be a way also to create more diversity, because that was another issue we were dealing with within our city organization. And, that starting pay went up to about $55,000 a year. Well, then, as I said, then came along the change in the Iowa union labor changes they gutted Iowa Chapter 20, where basically they stripped the unions of their negotiation powers to where right now they can currently only bargain for base wage. So typically they got away from that 4.5% step increase and went to a 1% increase and then the cost of living. And it really restricted the movement in the pay range. So what we started seeing was we were bringing in these operators, and basically we were becoming a training ground for other agencies. We were losing them to other cities and governmental agencies. And we found out basically that we were just training people to become operators for other agencies. And we'd never seen turnover rates, like we saw in that category, 23%. That was just extremely high. And then we talk a little bit about, we had some pay plan deficiencies. Moving in, governmental agencies, a lot of times people are used to seeing movement within their salary range. But when your range is several thousands of dollars from the top to the bottom, to only move forward 1% within your pay range really created some significant animosities with employees when they were used to seeing 4.5% before that. So we had to really step back and take a look at what we were doing. Another couple of things that I don't even have listed on here that were a problem was Iowa civil service law. Very antiquated law, where back in 1980, they decided that any city of over 8,000 by the census had to have a civil service commission and had to go through a rather extensive process for hiring. The law never changed. There's never been any adjustments made. So typically what we see is when we go out for a hire and there's not an approved list already, which a list lasts for 1 year, you're looking at probably 4 to 6 months of the process taking that long from start to where you'll actually see people get hired. And you can imagine, I always say in today's world, that the candidates today, they've already quit 1, 2 jobs. They're looking for a third by the time that period's over with. So we really got behind the 8 ball there too. The other is our own internal HR application process. Everything's going, online, and everything's going, tech wise. And it is such a cumbersome process that we know people that just, they get started in it and they just give up because they don't want to be on this online program that they're having difficulty maneuvering through and takes sometimes an hour or two to go through. So, you know, the business we're in, we're not at City Hall with office-based employees. You can imagine the type of staff that we hire, field-based employees, they don't want to go through all this computer stuff. So we really we've got some challenges we're working on there. As far as the opportunity side go, we did conduct a regional market study. I know Ben talked a little bit about, you know, the HR department. We're competing against the private sector too. Similar to Ben, we've got a very vibrant economy here. You know, we're just building our 4th and 5th Microsoft data centers, or building a new medical university right across the road from our new public services facility. Lots of construction going on. So we're competing against that private sector too. So when we did the regional market study, it was very indicative of that. We're getting behind the 8 ball, and we need to start looking at ways that we are competing against both the public sector and private sector. So we reacted, and the city manager decided that based on the market, we just moved all of those operators to a public services operations specialist position. So some of those folks that were making $44,000, $45,000 a year went up to almost 60 overnight. We also elevated some of the operations specialists who were in that lag cycle, elevated their pay up $3,000 to $5,000. So that was kind of interesting that just with a swipe of a pen, the city manager was able to do that, and we got support from the elected body. So right now, our starting salary is about $60,000 for an ops specialist, a person coming into our organization. The other thing that we realized, and Mitch had kind of talked about the part-time trend, we see the same thing. We're competing for those part-time people with the Iowa DOT, other cities. And I grew up out in the rural area, and I think it's pretty indicative of what Mitch said. It's easier getting people to sign up out in the rural area. But when you get in the metro area, we're competing against a large number of different aspects where, you know, you got Hardee's or McDonald's or some other restaurants advertising, you know, a $500 sign-on bonus and $16 an hour. And so it's very difficult when you start looking at part-time. We were in the $12 to $14 range 2 or 3 years ago. We were starting to push upwards of, you know, 20 to 22. And finally, you know, we were hiring about 12 full-time bodies in the spring and about 6 in the fall. We just decided to change 6 of those positions to full-time laborer positions. So we established a new pay classification. Doesn't require a CDL, but you know, those positions are going to pay up to about $27.50 an hour. That's the top end with full benefits. So we kind of had to change our philosophy on part-time employees too. We lowered our qualification requirements. We don't require someone to have a CDL coming in the door now. And we've kind of talked about the dynamics of how are we going to handle this new CDL requirement. And basically, you know, I've already started exploring training opportunities, and we've got some in the state, but also we're going to probably have to develop an agreement with candidates. If we're going to make the investment in that CDL with them, we're going to have a certain term of employment, or they're going to have to get into reimbursing the city if they decide to leave. It's almost similar to what a lot of the small towns have to do with police officers who come in, they put them through the academy, and then they step out and move on to bigger and better things. So we're going to have to work on that agreement. Civil service, we talked a little bit about that. Right now, we have a lobbying effort, and the state legislature is really taking a strong look at changing civil service requirements. The challenge there has been, you know, when the Republicans went at the union law and gutted it, it really created some real disparity between the Democrats and the Republicans with regards to labor. So the Democrats have been a little slow to want to take a look at civil service, but it's also an impediment to diversity. So there's a lot of different angles to that. So civil service, there's a lobbying effort, and we're kind of leading that charge to help us with that, because as you can imagine, having that 4 to 6 month period to try to hire people is just a huge impediment. We've also too, went to 4 10-hour days for some of our staff where we can gain efficiencies. We've been changing our benefit package. I mean, we just added a paternal leave, where the employee gets 3 weeks off now, and that's really a huge thing. But we're starting to see those generational things come into play too. And like Ben and had said too, we're finding out a lot of these employees, they don't want to work overtime very badly. So it's kind of a lot of things, but we're trying to look at the comp time and letting people have more time off. When they work the overtime hours, when we really need them during snowstorm events, especially, we try and be pretty liberal with letting them have leave the rest of the year. So we're finding different ways to approach it, but whether you're a DOT, a county, a city, depending on where you're located, it's not a one size fits all. We all have these different challenges we're facing, but the labor market, I think it's still going to keep getting harder and harder. We've been just getting by with just getting enough people on our civil service lists, or we're just skimming by. We maybe only have 1 or 2. The operator position's a little easier, but some of our others, we're just getting by. And we know that we're going to have to change the way we're doing things, because pretty soon, I don't know that we're going to keep just getting by. We're going to be short. So a lot of dynamics playing out here, and it's definitely going to create some challenges for a lot of agencies here in the future.
Thanks, Bret. This is kind of for everybody on the panel. Are you guys seeing the same issues with mechanics? Are they typically, are you having difficulty keeping those filled as well, those positions?
Well, I'll start off in West Des Moines. That was one of them where we just got by. We actually had to go through a second round of civil service process to get a mechanic hired for this last position. So, and that pay is running up in the upwards, the upper range, 75 to 80,000. But it's pretty interesting, because you're hearing advertisements on the radio where, like, Waste Management, is having a $5,000 sign-on bonus in their wages. So that is another area, once again, specialized. That's even harder than the operation side of things for us.
Yeah, we had significant issues, and we always still do, but we've kind of tackled some of that with our wage. We've done 2 pretty aggressive wage jumps in the last 2 years. Ours start about $32 an hour and paying upwards a little over 40 an hour when they're done. But we had to get rid of our whole swing shift. We had to really look at where our shifts were and try and move things around so that it was more accommodating to the lifestyle people are looking for, rather than working till 11 o'clock at night. So we changed things on that end, and that seemed to work.
Yeah, we had similar. We just actually upped the pay scale for our mechanics at the Iowa DOT also, and we've also implemented a horizontal career path for our mechanics due to the some of the union law changes that Bret talked about. It's taking mechanics and a lot of our positions at the DOT upwards of that, 12 to 15 years if they start at the bottom of the pay scale to get to the top of the pay scale. So with our horizontal career path, we just piloted that for the first year here with the mechanics. If they complete the training requirements for that, they'll get to the top of the pay scale in 3 years.